Rain hits the pavement on a Tuesday morning in October 1973. That sound, you wake up to more days than not. Your mom is already in the kitchen making toast when you come downstairs, still half asleep. And she glances out the window at the gray sky and says what she always says, "You'll dry." If you grew up in British Columbia in the 1970s, you lived in a place that felt different from the rest of Canada. The mountains, the ocean, the rain that never stopped anything. Life moved at its own pace here, shaped by geography and a culture that was distinctly West Coast. Stick around until the end, because what we're about to walk through will transport you straight back to a BC that doesn't exist anymore. Let's start with what defined BC life more than anything else: the rain. The rain never stopped you from doing anything. Not school, not playing outside, not errands your mom needed you to run. You just learned to move through it like it was part of the air itself. Drops hitting your hood, soaking into your sleeves, pooling in the low spots on the pavement where you'd step and feel the water seep through the canvas of your runners. By the time you got to school, your socks were damp and your hair was dripping, but so was everyone else's. You'd hang your coat on the hook outside the classroom, and it would still be wet when you put it back on at 3:30 to walk home. Nobody complained about the rain. It was just BC. Your dad would say, if you waited for sunshine in Vancouver, you'd never leave the house. And he was right. The rain was constant, reliable, and somehow comforting in its predictability. Saturday afternoons meant Stanley Park if your parents had time, and the rain let up enough to make the drive worth it. You'd pile into the car, your dad at the wheel, your mom in the front seat with a thermos of coffee, and you'd head across the bridge towards those massive trees that made the rest of the city feel small and new by comparison. Stanley Park didn't feel like a park. It felt like a forest that happened to have paths cut through it. You could wander for hours under that canopy of cedars and Douglas firs, the air cool and damp, no matter what time of year it was, the ground soft with moss and fallen needles. The light came through the branches in strange, filtered ways, green and quiet. And if you walked far enough from the road, you couldn't hear the city anymore. Just birds, just wind moving through the tops of the trees. The zoo was there, tucked into one corner of the park, small and simple compared to what would come later. You'd stand at the fence watching the animals, polar bears pacing in their enclosures, the smell of wet fur and old concrete mixing with the evergreen smell that was everywhere. Back in your neighborhood, life had a rhythm you didn't think about because it was just how things worked. If you lived near Commercial Drive, you knew the Italian bakery on the corner, the one where the smell of fresh bread would hit you half a block away. Your mom would send you there with a note and exact change, and the woman behind the counter would hand you a loaf, still warm from the oven, wrapped in thin paper that would start to go translucent from the heat by the time you got home. The drive didn't have a name yet, not the one people use now. It was just where you lived. Neighbors knew your name. The man who ran the corner store would ask how your dad was doing. If your sister still had that cold, she'd been fighting. Downtown felt manageable back then, even on busy days. Granville Street had movie theaters with marquees that lit up at night. Restaurants where your family might go for dinner if it was someone's birthday or your dad got a raise at work. The buildings weren't tall yet. Nothing that would block your view of the mountains to the north or the water to the west. You could stand on certain corners and see both at once, that perfect alignment of geography that made Vancouver feel like it existed in a place that shouldn't be able to hold a city. Your dad worked down at the port, or maybe he worked for a company that did business with the ships that came in and out of Burrard Inlet. Sometimes on weekends, he'd drive the family down to the waterfront just to look. You'd park near the docks and watch those massive cargo ships lit up against the dark water, their hulls streaked with rust and seawater, men moving around on deck doing work you couldn't begin to understand. The port smelled like diesel and salt and something else. Something industrial and foreign that reminded you the world was bigger than Vancouver, bigger than anything you could see from where you stood. Those ships came from places you'd only seen in books, Japan, Australia, ports in California you'd never visit. And they'd leave again, disappearing into the strait, heading back out to that vastness you couldn't quite picture. Sunday nights, if your parents felt like going out, might mean the Marco Polo on Pender Street. The place had a smorgasbord that ran from 3 in the afternoon until 8, and if you timed it right, if you were young enough, you'd eat for free. Your mom and dad figured that out pretty quick. You'd walk in and the smell would hit you first. Soy sauce, garlic, something sweet and sticky from the spare ribs that sat in metal trays under heat lamps. The tables were small and packed close together, families crowded around them, kids picking at fried rice, adults loading their plates with chow mein and sweet and sour pork. The noise was constant, plates clattering, conversations overlapping, the kitchen door swinging open and shut as servers brought out more food. Your parents would let you get whatever you wanted, within reason. And you'd make multiple trips to the buffet, piling your plate higher each time. When 8 o'clock came and families had to clear out to make room for the evening crowd, your mom would sometimes get a couple of takeout containers filled with whatever was left over from the smorgasbord. The staff knew you. They didn't mind. Rain didn't stop you from playing, not even when it came down hard. You'd ride your bike through puddles that had pooled in the street, water spraying up from your tires, soaking your jeans from the knees down. You'd climb trees even when the bark was slippery, and your hands couldn't quite grip the way they did when it was dry. You'd build forts in empty lots using whatever you could find, sheets of plywood and old tarps that would sag in the middle from the weight of collected rainwater. Coming home soaked was normal. Your mom would make you strip down in the mudroom or by the back door, hang your clothes near the heater, and laugh at how drenched you'd managed to get. By dinner, your jeans would be stiff and warm. You'd put them back on without thinking twice. Sunday afternoon sometimes meant walks along English Bay, slow wandering with your parents where nobody had a destination in mind. Your dad's hands in his pockets, your mom's arm looped through his, you trailing a few steps behind, picking up rocks and throwing them into the water. The beach at English Bay wasn't crowded in the 70s, not like it would become later. A few families, some people walking dogs, maybe someone sitting on a log reading a newspaper. The sand was gray and cold most of the year, the water too frigid to swim in unless you were brave or stupid. But you weren't there to swim. You were there to be near the water, to hear the small waves lapping against the shore, to smell that mix of salt and seaweed and wet wood. Your parents would stop and look at the mountains across the water. You'd skip rocks. Nobody said much. Taking the bus alone felt like a rite of passage. Your mom would give you exact change, remind you which stop to get off at, and send you on your way. You'd sit by the window, quiet, watching the neighborhoods roll past. Kitsilano with its small houses and families who'd been there forever. Fairview with its mix of old and new, Mount Pleasant where the streets started to climb, and you could see the mountains more clearly if you looked north. The bus driver never questioned why a kid was riding alone. You'd sit there feeling older than you were, holding your transfer ticket, counting stops, making sure you didn't miss yours. Except once you did miss it, lost count, looked up too late, and the bus was 3 blocks past where you needed to be. You got off and walked back in the rain, embarrassed at your own mistake, but you made it. And the next time, you counted more carefully. Your house was small by today's standards, but nobody talked about square footage back then. A kitchen where your mom made dinner every night, pot roast or meatloaf or chicken with canned vegetables. A living room with a TV that got 3 channels, if the weather was clear, maybe 4, if your dad adjusted the antenna just right. Bedrooms barely big enough for a bed and a dresser. The furnace would kick on in the mornings, that low rumble that meant the house was warming up, and you'd stand over the floor vent, letting hot air blow up through your pajamas before you got dressed for school. Winter in Vancouver wasn't brutal, not like the prairies or the interior, but it was damp, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there. One evening, your dad came home late from work. Your mom kept dinner warm in the oven, not saying much, just waiting. When he finally walked through the door, cold air came in with him, and he kissed her on the cheek and said traffic was bad. That was all. Dinner happened at 6:15 instead of 6. Home felt warm because of what happened there. Dinner every night, homework at the kitchen table, under the overhead light. Your dad reading the paper in his chair whilst your mom folded laundry on the couch. That rhythm, predictable and steady. Fog would roll in from the water sometimes, thick and slow, and suddenly the whole city would go quiet. Traffic sounded muffled, voices carried differently. You couldn't see more than a block ahead, and the streetlights would glow soft and yellow through the gray like they were underwater. The city was still there. The mountains were still there. You just couldn't see them. But that invisibility made Vancouver feel smaller, more knowable, like it had pulled itself inward to wait for the fog to lift. You'd walk to school through that fog and feel like you were the only person moving through the world, even though you could hear other kids a street over, their voices drifting through the damp air. Chinatown on weekends had its own energy, something alive and busy that was different from the rest of the city. Families shopping together, crowding into stores that sold things you didn't see anywhere else, vegetables you couldn't name, live fish in tanks, smells that were unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Ginger and 5-spice and something frying in the back of a restaurant kitchen. You'd walk through with your parents, not buying anything most of the time, just looking, taking it in. The signs in Chinese characters, the way people spoke in languages you didn't understand, but that sounded comfortable, like home. Chinatown wasn't separate from Vancouver. It was woven in, essential. School days followed a pattern. Walk there in the morning, sit at a desk that was bolted to the floor, copy notes from the blackboard in cursive, eat lunch in the cafeteria or at your desk if you brought something from home. Recess meant going outside, no matter the weather, running around until the bell rang. One day you forgot your homework, your teacher asked for it, and you had nothing to hand in. Your face went hot. She just looked at you, said to bring it tomorrow, and moved on to the next person. You brought it the next day. After school, you'd walk home, drop your bag by the door, grab whatever snack your mom had left out, and head back outside. Your only rule was to be home for dinner. That gave you hours to roam the neighborhood, to play street hockey with kids from down the block, to explore empty lots or walk to the park. Nobody locked their doors during the day. Some people didn't lock them at night. The neighborhood looked out for itself. North Vancouver felt like another world, even though it was just across the water. Taking the ferry over, standing on the deck, whilst the city disappeared behind you and the mountains grew bigger ahead, made the trip feel longer than it actually was. The wind would whip across the water, cold and sharp, and you'd stand there watching seagulls chase the boat, diving for scraps people tossed overboard. North Van had a different feel once you got there. Quieter, more trees, houses tucked into hillsides where the streets climbed steep and the views went on forever. It felt less like city and more like mountain town, even though you could still see Vancouver across the inlet, the buildings small and distant. Coming back across the water at the end of the day, city lights starting to glow as the sun went down, felt like returning from somewhere much farther away. Woodward's wasn't just a department store, it was a BC institution, and $1.49 day was a weekly event. Every Tuesday, Woodward's would slash prices on everything, and families would plan their shopping around it. Your mom would drag you downtown, and you'd spend hours browsing floors of merchandise while she hunted for deals. The food floor was legendary. Fresh produce, a bakery that smelled like heaven, a lunch counter where you could get a grilled cheese and soup for next to nothing. Woodward's understood BC families, understood what they needed and what they could afford. The $1.49 day jingle is still stuck in your head if you heard it enough times. $1.49 day Tuesday, it burrowed into your brain and never left. By the late 70s, whispers started about something big coming to Vancouver. Expo '86 was still years away, but the city was already changing, preparing, growing into something larger. You could feel it in the air, a sense that BC was about to step onto a bigger stage. New buildings were going up, old neighborhoods were being redeveloped, and there was optimism that felt different from the rest of Canada. BC in the 70s was still finding its identity, still figuring out what it wanted to be. Not quite like the rest of Canada, not quite like the American West Coast, but something in between, something uniquely ours. Friday nights often meant fish and chips from the local chippy, wrapped in newspaper, eaten with your fingers whilst sitting in the car. The fish would be hot and crispy, the chips thick and salty, and the vinegar would soak through the paper, leaving your fingers smelling like it for hours. You'd eat in the car because it was raining, always raining. And by the time you got home, the food would be gone and you'd be full. Fish and chips wasn't fancy, but it was Friday. And Friday meant the weekend was starting, and that was enough. If you didn't live in Vancouver or Victoria, you probably lived in a logging town or a mining town, and life was different there. Smaller communities where everyone knew everyone, where your dad worked at the mill or in the mines, where the whistle would blow at shift change, and the whole town would know what time it was. These towns were built around resource extraction, and when the resources ran out, or the company closed, the towns died. But in the 70s, they were alive. Community halls hosted dances, hockey rinks were the social center, and Friday nights meant gathering at the Legion or the local pub. Life was simpler, harder, and more connected than city life could ever be. Sunday nights meant The Beachcombers on CBC, the show that made BC famous across Canada. Following Nick Adonitis and his adventures up and down the coast, the Beachcombers showed the rest of Canada what BC was actually like. The ocean, the forests, the small coastal communities that most Canadians would never visit. You'd watch it with your family, recognizing places you'd been, landscapes that looked like home. It made you proud to be from BC, to live in a place that was beautiful enough to be on TV every week. The show ran for 19 years, and for BC kids growing up in the 70s, it was proof that your home mattered, that the rest of Canada was paying attention. Summer meant salmon fishing if your family had a boat or knew someone who did. You'd head out early, the water calm and glassy, the mountains reflected perfectly on the surface. Your dad would set the lines, and you'd wait, watching the rods, hoping for that sudden bend that meant a fish was on. When you caught a salmon, a big one, 20 or 30 pounds, it felt like winning the lottery. Your dad would clean it on the dock, and your mom would cook it that night. Fresh salmon with butter and lemon, the best meal you'd eat all summer. Fishing wasn't just a hobby in BC, it was part of the culture, part of what made living here special. The ocean provided, and you took what you needed with respect and gratitude. Life in 1970s, British Columbia moved at a different speed. You could spend an entire Saturday doing nothing in particular and not feel like you'd wasted it. Walk to the bakery, play in the park, come home for lunch, go back out. That was enough. The city itself felt young, like it was still figuring out who it wanted to be. Not small town anymore, but not quite big city either. Somewhere in between. The mountains, the water, the rain held it in place, set the pace, reminded you that nature was always close. You didn't think about how lucky you were, you just lived. Walked to school in the rain, played in Stanley Park, took the bus across town, ate at the Marco Polo, watched ships in the harbor. Small moments that didn't feel special at the time. Close your eyes and see it one more time. You're walking home at dusk. The streetlights are just coming on, pale yellow against the dark blue sky. The pavement is black and slick from rain, and your reflection moves underneath you as you walk. Somewhere behind you, a ferry horn sounds low across the water. The air smells like salt and wet cedar. Your hands are cold. You're almost home. That was British Columbia in the 1970s, a place that raised you gently, one rainy day at a time. If this brought back memories of growing up in BC, of rain-soaked walks and Stanley Park adventures, drop your stories in the comments below. Tell us about your neighborhood, your corner store, the places that made BC home. And if this trip back to 1970s British Columbia hit you with nostalgia, hit that like button and subscribe, because we've got more stories about the Canada we remember, the one that's slowly disappearing but lives on in our memories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the rain never stopped anything in BC. It just made everything a little bit softer, a little bit quieter, a little bit more like home.